So this recording is for my non-technical friends. When I speak to them, they think MCP, Model Context Protocol, is a magic, right? Oh, wow. It's like a magician doing magic, right? So I thought, why don't I actually reveal what's behind the magic in a very simple way, without using much of technical terms, right? So that's the attempt that I have taken here. So let me go next. There'll be no code for this. This will be just slidewares. Uh, so let me go to the next slide. Okay. So when we first started to use language model, we give it an input, or we call it prompt, and we get a response or an output, right? That was the first generation when first GPT-4, like we were all amazed. Oh my God. And I give a input, it is giving me a answer, right? We're all amazed. When we started using it in organizations, we found, oh, that is of not much of use, right? Because this language model has learned from the internet and it is giving me answer from the internet, which is of no use because the context of the internet is not the same as the context of my organization. So we discovered the famous RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where we said, okay, now Mr. Language Model, don't answer me based on what you know from your internet knowledge. I will write a program, a retrieval logic in Python or any other language. I have my context store where I have all my knowledge documents. I'm simplifying it, right? All my knowledge documents and all in a machine readable way. Based on the prompt, I will retrieve the right context, which is my context. I will give it to you and then you respond, right? RAG became very famous and still it is one of the most popular techniques through which we ground a particular language model to the context of the organization, right? Then some intelligent people came in and say, okay, let's make this agentic, right? It will not only get the context, we will also give the language model some tool descriptions, basically the tool name, that what the tool does, and the context, and we'll ask the language model, is there any of this tool that you would like to use to further enrich the context, or maybe based on the context if you want to take some action? The language model, since it understands the semantics of language, understands um, the context it has given, it understands it, and so, oh yeah, for this particular question, or for this particular question and the context that you gave me, I might have to, I can actually, I recommend that you use tool one, because the tool one description says that, okay, it can do a Google search, right? Execute tool one so that you can get additional context from the internet through Google search and add it to your organization context, right? So my program here, it's a Python program, let's say, okay, takes that tool, because the language model, while uh, uh, selecting the tool, it is also uh, outputting what parameters are required by the tool. So my program now knows, okay, this is the tool, these are the parameters that I need to use. My tool execution logic then executes that tool, goes to Google, This is just an example. It can be any other tool, right? It gets the information, gives it to the language model now with the context of the organization plus whatever I got from Google search, and gives me the response, right? And we all graduated to the the era of agents. Although I simplified it, agents have memory, agents have planning, reasoning capability. Nowadays, I don't actually debate on agent definitions because no one converges on agent definition. We talk about levels of agency, right? But yeah, for the sake of the discussion, yeah, this is agentic because I have a tool. Through this tool, it can do some action or get some additional context, right? So that is that we graduated to the era of agents. Then some very intelligent people came in and said, see, if you are in this model, every agent that you will create, this entire thing you'll have to again replicate, right? For the next agent, for the next agent, for the next agent, right? You are writing duplicate code, right? It's also very difficult to manage the authorization because now every of the agent you'll have to have those authorization and authentications to the tool. You'll have to replicate that, right? That's it. Let's look at a model like this where this entire all these things, right? I'll replace it with something called a client logic. So in the MCP terminology, there are certain terms, right? One term is called host, right? So now your agent in MCP terms becomes the host. The host has a client. The client now have access to an MCP server. This MCP server now hosts the logic to call or to execute the tools, right? And it can have multiple tools. And this server exposes two endpoints for you. If a client asks the server that, okay, tell me what tool you have, there is a list tool interface through which the server says, okay, this is the tool name, this is the tool description, this is how the tool needs to be called, like these are the parameters the tool needs. That information it gives to the client. Basically, now the client knows what is the name of the tool, or what are the names of the tool, what are the descriptions of the tool, what parameters are required to the tool, right? And this uh, message transfer between the server and the client happens through JSON RPC, right? And the transport layer is either STDIO, which you probably will not use because STDIO is local way of connecting the client and server. The client and server needs to be on the same machine, and then if you're locally calling it using Cloud Desktop or some local means, you might use STDO. But you have a remote server, then you'll use SSC, server sent events, and HTTP to call your server, right? But it happens through this transport layer through JSON RPC, right? The client asks what tools you have. It says, okay, these are the tools I have. The client then sends that information to the language model saying, language model, you now tell me out of these tools, and now you have the additional context also in my prompt. Based on that, which tool may be relevant for this particular use case? So Mr. Language Model says, okay, yeah, tool one is something that you should call to get the additional information. Then the client calls a call tool, and the call tool, it gives a tool name. The server knows now that this particular tool, since it has the logic of the tool, it routes that call tool to the particular tool, gets the external data and compute or external data, external context which is exposed as a service outside, right? Gets that information, gives it back to the client gives it to the language model, and the language model then gives you the response, right? That's all is what MCP is, right? I have mentioned here only the tool, which is one of the primitives of MCP server. There are two other, which is prompts and resources. Those also follow same approach, like all your prompts, you can expose it in a prompt registry, like in an MCP server. Any resources, data resources that you need, right? Databases, vector stores, and all. Those are called, that is a resource primitive that also you can expose in the server following the same approach. Primarily, there are four terms in the MCP server. One is the host, which is your agent. One is a client, that is the client logic, which helps you to connect to the server, which is the third term in the terminology, and your transport uh, protocol or the transport layer, which is either STDI or SEC in HTTP. That's all is what MCP is. Yeah, but whatever I mentioned to you, it's a very simplistic way of uh, understanding MCP. And then it's like when you code it, right, there are many more primitives. There are two more primitives that are coming, which is the sampling and the root, right? Those are a little deep dive. But for as a non-technical person, if you want to understand what MCP is, that's what it is, right? So what it is solving is, now instead of me duplicating this code for every agent, duplicating the authorization access for everyone, I can centralize all of them in this server, and through a client, I can connect it, right? If I want to actually restrict certain agents to certain tools, I can create a separate server for that agent and only expose the tools that I want for that agent in that server, right? The other pattern is the server can itself become another client, right? So if there is a uh, external product which already has an MCP server inbuilt, the server can act as a client and then uh, call the MCP server of the other product and get the information, right? So that's all for this recording, and that's about MCP. Thank you.